Everyone is welcome here, it's time to make new friends. Fill your Glencairn. Share a dram with the spirit of Edmonton. Sluncha!
Good day, whiskey brothers, whiskey sisters, whiskey friends, and welcome to the International Whiskey Journey. We're honored to have you, the viewer, and our panel here with us today. My name's Dolph. I'm the founder of the International Whiskey Journey, and I'm your host tonight. For those of you that are a little bit new to us, I'll explain a little bit of what we're about. We are a bunch of whiskey geeks. That's it. We love to share a dram, but we love to share the geekiness that comes with whiskey that only those that really care about will actually enjoy. That sounds bad, but the geekiest of us like to be here, so I'm glad you're all here. We're doing an international whiskey journey because international whiskeys don't get the kudos they deserve, and I love drinking it. I love promoting it. That's why we're here today, and that's why we've got this gentleman right here with us today, Mr. Patrick Van Zuidam. This is every Saturday a fantastic way to get information right from the owners, right from the master distillers, and it's a great way to promote international whiskeys. And I get to drink whiskey every Saturday, and sometimes early in the morning, 11 o'clock, Rich at 10. We're good. We're joined by Mr. Patrick Van Zuidam. He's from Millstone and Zuidam Distillers. Some of us know it just as Millstone, but we should. Zuidam Distillers. It's his last name. We should remember it. And this is our 9th stop. 9th out of 10 stops. So this is our second last on our journey this summer. One more to go. And that's it. Gentlemen, if you could, please do the introductions. And we're going to start with Joss, go to Rich, and then our star Patrick today. And tell us what's in your glass and your other handles, please.
Hey, I'm Joss from Dram Society, just north of Toronto right now. We are starting on this delicious, haven't got into it yet, but PX single malt. And it's my first time with Millstone, so really excited to see what these guys are all about, what Patrick's been cooking up. Just really happy to be here. Thanks for organizing all this, Dolph, and Patrick, and Richard as well. But I'll throw it over to Rich.
We're really happy to have you.
Hey,
and you too.
Good morning, Richard Lee from the We Rock Whiskey Club here on beautiful Salt Spring Island, west coast of Canada. In my glass, I've got the Millstone PX peated 46%, from Millstone, and I've got to say it's I think it's the 4th Millstone that I've had in the last year or so. I first started with Millstone about a year ago with a group of guys, and it's been fantastic stuff. So I'm super stoked about being here today. Thanks, Patrick, for being here.
Hi, I have to introduce myself. My name is Patrick. I'm the idiot that makes the stuff.
Ooh.
So yeah, any secrets you want to learn, just let me know.
We got lots of secrets, lots of stuff we're going to ask you. And I'm Dolph. I'm the president of the Alberta Scotch Society. I'm at the Spirit of Edmonton, lots of different things. But we're here. We're here. We're enjoying the day. It's a beautiful day. 3 of us have really nice weather. Patrick says it's really hot in the distillery, although it's not.
Distillery, but freaking outside is raining all day.
Well, that's what happens in Bas, Nassau, Netherlands. It does rain. Every time I've been to the Netherlands, just rain. It always has. I've always enjoyed it, but it's always been rain. But let's jump right into this, Patrick. And we're going back. We're going back into history. So your father, let's go back to Dad. Your father, Fred, he left the Cooper Distillery as a senior distiller 1974 to start his own distillery. Yes. And your father and mother opened the distillery, and then your mother worked hard every day at the distillery. You and your brother Gilbert spent the majority of your time after school, on the weekends, at this family business. And I love this type of story because it shows, one, your devotion to family, 2, your devotion to hard work, but beyond this, your parents encouraged you to get an education. You did. You got your master's in information management. I got that. But you still went back to the distillery. So this is all about you and your love of the distillery. Tell me what drew you back. Was it your sense of duty to your family? You missed the ambiance of the distillery, the smells, the sounds, the routine, the people? What was it?
it's probably a little bit of everything, isn't it?
Okay.
Like you said, my brother and me grew up in the distillery. We are, we spend our entire childhood in the distillery. Cleaning stills, putting bottles on the conveyor belt on the bottling line. This is what we did, and I always loved it. My father always let me play around in the lab,
Yep.
with flavors and everything. I did my first distillations when I was 12. Stills were a lot smaller than this one, but
A little, but
a little bit smaller, yeah. So yeah, it's growing up in the distillery that is immensely satisfying. People think child labor is something that happens in China, but
Nope.
we had it here in Holland as well.
Oh, and I've got some pictures of that too. So
my parents were
what you do
poor.
now,
Oh, this
so
is my son.
there's your son, and
Yeah.
that's not the only picture of him working. We got a lot of pictures of you working your son. So I
Hey,
think
teach
that's
him young.
fantastic.
You have to teach him young.
And how old was he when he was helping you clean and turn on the pipes? When did you start?
He just turned 6. So the pictures were probably when he was 5. Yeah, he's more getting in the way than helping, I have to say. But he loves being around his family. So I think probably for me that was also the attraction, because it was also a chance for us to spend time with my mom and dad, because my mom and dad were poor. Yeah, they were working class people that started their distillery, which is not very smart. And then we were poor, so we had to work 7 days a week to make it work. So my parents were at work a lot. So being at work with them was also for us a chance to spend time with them. Yeah.
Yep.
And I always loved it here in the distillery. It was a lot smaller then. My father started with 300 square meters. I think now we're about almost 9,000 square meters. So it's a lot bigger now than it was then. But yeah,
that leads me into my next question really well, because I was going to say, I'm sure there's a vast difference between the two distilleries. Your father's where you grew up, and this one today. Can you tell us how and when the distillery finally changed hands from your parents to you, and then because I think from you it became the bigger distillery where you are now? I think that's your influence, right?
My parents were poor, so growth was a gradual thing. So it wasn't from one day to the next. My father had to buy a pallet of bottles, fill them, then sell a pallet of bottles. Otherwise, he didn't have money to buy a new pallet of bottles.
Okay.
So that was a really hard time, and it was difficult to grow that way. But they persevered and they hang in there. And my brother and me helped all our lives. Even during our studies, we were still at the distillery helping. So we're never completely gone. When I finished my master's, of course, back in the 90s, information management was the hot new thing.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it still is, but not so new anymore. So, job offers were lined up, so that was not a problem. And all those jobs actually paid money. Which is different from running a distillery. But yeah, the choice was to either go do something like a real job or work in a distillery. So, I made the mistake of joining the distillery. We all do stupid things in our life.
Oh, it's turned out pretty well for you, buddy. I'm pretty sure. I think you're pretty happy with where you are right now.
I think the distillery is in a good place. I think we make wonderful products, and it took us a long time, but right now we're completely we don't have investors. Well, no, you're just the family, but and we don't have any outside financing, so we are completely self-reliant. So everything around me is paid for. Every last cask, every last bottle, every last building. So everything is paid for, and that is something that we achieved. And but it was not, from one day to the next. It was like a
from 1974. He's been working at it for a long time. But you did come in, and you're the founder of Zuidam Distillers. So the name changed at a certain point.
Yeah. You're right. When I came into the company, my parents said, we cannot pay you much because we don't have money. But we want you to have a third of the company. So we made a new company, and that we divided with 33% each. So that's how it happened.
So
right now,
your
my
parents
brother,
33, you 33, and your brother 33. Is that the way it went?
no, my brother was very young then, so he
Okay.
was not involved in the business yet. He was still in college.
Ooh, okay.
So he joined later, and now he's got 50% ownership, and 45. I've got 45, and my parents got 10.
Do they still come to the distillery every once in a while?
Yeah. Up until COVID, I have to say. Dad is now Dad is from 34, so he's 87, yeah.
Okay.
He had a stroke 6 years ago, so he's not in a bad place. But before that, yeah, he was in the distillery every day.
Oh, nice. Good.
Not necessarily doing the day-to-day things, because that was not necessary, but just for me, it's nice to have a sounding board, isn't it? Somebody that has 50, 60 years experience in making liqueurs and spirits, and it's always nice to have somebody to say, this happened, how we're going to solve this. And my mom was part of the day-to-day operations up until the start of freaking COVID.
Okay.
And then when COVID started, I said, well, Mom, you're I cannot tell her age, but that's big no.
Stay home, but stay safe, Mom. I love having you here, but we need you to stay safe.
That is exactly what happened. Yeah, it was not. I thought it was not safe, because there's, a distillery has got lots of people coming and going. You got staff, you got suppliers, truck drivers, everybody coming in. So I didn't want to risk her health and my father's health. So.
Okay, well, it's good. And your brother is sales director, is that correct?
Yes. He does all the important stuff.
Okay. And before we continue, I just want to say a hi to everyone that's out there with us. So Valerie's there, Gordon G, Gigi's there, Ben Demon Hunter is there, so's Yarka, Valerie, I already said, Greg is there from Craftworks as well, and who else we have? Paul Walters. We've got our people and Yarka, and the little conversations going on the side. I'm going to leave that for a second. Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so your father very involved, but he didn't focus on whiskey and rye. That was your decision, because you wanted to branch out. You wanted to go internationally, and I think whiskey would have been the logical case at that point. So when did you make that decision, and how hard was it to convince Mom and Dad to do that with you?
I think that part was easy. I think the convincing Mom and Dad was easy. They always encouraged my brother and me to find our own way in the business. So I think that was the easy part. My parents were mostly doing vodka and liqueurs and a little bit of Geneva. I thought that was a bit dangerous, because liqueurs are wonderful products to make for us as distillers. There's such nice products. All these fresh fruits, vanilla pods, all these beautiful ingredients to work with is wonderful. The only problem is that people don't drink them.
Not as much as whiskey. No, there's a lot more whiskey being sold. But your Geneva does well at home. Does it do well outside of the Netherlands?
It does, actually. It's very surprising to me, because when I came into the company and Mom and Dad, I convinced Mom and Dad to do. My first priority was Geneva.
Oh,
that is.
I thought your parents would have done that already. Okay.
Well, they were doing a little bit of Geneva, but I want to do it. I wanted to do it grain to glass. So I wanted to buy the grain, mash it, ferment it, and distill it in house, age it, and then put it in bottles. So that was my thing, because that was the way Geneva was made 100, 200 years ago.
And your mash bill is a third barley, a third rye, and a third corn? Is it corn?
Yes. Yes, actually, yeah. So
what do you put for the is it licorice root? I think you have 3 additives that you put into it. 3
botanicals. So basically what you start out with Geneva is that you mash like a bourbon or a rye whiskey.
Yep.
So you mix the grains, you mash them, you sucrinify the starches,
Yep.
you ferment it. In our case, we do the 9-day fermentations for the rye whiskey and the Genevers, and then we distill it. And
Yep.
from up until that moment, it's a grain whiskey or whatever you want to call it. And then before we put it in the casks, we do one more distillation over some botanicals. So basically, it's a new make whiskey that you distill once extra over botanicals.
Okay.
And then
So is it macerated or is it a gin basket?
it's just dumped into the still.
Into the still macerated. Okay, good. It's good to know, because I think the Geneva I tried with you the very first time you came to Edmonton 5 years ago, maybe 6. It was a while ago. Greg and Yark on this, I could probably tell us when he was here then. And after that answer, I'm going to go to Joss and Richard, see if they have a question. But Patrick, 5 years ago?
Well, probably. I can't.
I can't remember.
Time goes so fast. Yeah, we've
Yeah.
been stuck with this COVID shit for almost 2 years already. So
Yeah. Do you find you do that too? I say it was a couple of years ago, but then it was 2 years before COVID, so it's like 4. I've lost
probably 4 or 5 years.
a
I
little
guess
bit.
that's what it is. Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, let's go to questions. You guys, you have anything for these gentlemen?
I'm just really, really enjoying this whiskey. I'm just
Thank you.
I'm just so deep. I'm listening, and I will get to some more questions, but I'm going to.
That's the PX, no? You're drinking.
Yeah.
The PX.
I don't want to jump the gun because I know we get into that in a little bit usually, but yeah, just a fantastic product. This is totally my wheelhouse. So I'm here right now.
Heated and PX,
Rich, you got a question yet?
I just want to hear a little bit more about launching the expansion of the distillery from the 3,000 square feet to the 9,000 square feet, and how and why. I guess not why, but I think it's more of an economic reason and a passion thing. But what was that process like in terms of starting to launch whiskey?
Whiskey, of course, has a long. You have to be making it for quite some time. So the first whiskey was made I think the first experiments were in 92, 93.
Okay.
And then, full scale or small production, not full scale production, but yeah, small production in 95, 96, and once you find your rhythm, once you find your mash bill and how you exactly want to distill it and ferment it and all that things that, it's a learning process. So you get better at it. So I think, in 98, we went into a bigger scale production. And then, of course, when that is successful, you run out of capacity really quickly. So you put some extra stills in, and, that's it. To be honest, since I've joined the business, there has not been a year where we have not expanded here or there, or built a new warehouse, or built a new distillery, or built something. It's every year is something going on. Well, this year we put in the fire suppressant system. So every year there has been some new development going on.
Well, I've got some pictures.
This is why we don't have money, because every time we make a little bit of money, it disappears again.
Hey, Dolph, sorry. If you don't mind if I jump in, actually, I was reminded actually now of something that came to mind. I was looking on your website, and I couldn't believe the number of products you guys have. It's crazy. And so I'm looking at this going, okay, well, some people will focus on, primarily we're a whiskey shop, but we do some gin and vodka or whatever your sort of, portfolio is. But you guys seem to have everything, and also, niche expressions of those things as well. So how do you, that must take a crazy amount of coordination inside your distillery to try to keep not only producing that stuff, but keeping track of how much of that stuff you have. How do you manage all that? How do you maintain that big of a portfolio and still manage to put out like quality stuff?
Yeah, it's actually not that hard. You grow into it, because you start with this amount of product, and then next year there's one added, and I have to say, first week of the year I make a planning of everything we need to produce.
Okay.
And then of course, those plannings rarely are 100% accurate, but during the year you adapt and modify, and things go. I think the biggest challenge is that a lot of the things that we do take a lot of time to reach completion. So, of course, Genevers and whiskey, you have to age in casks. But even for liqueurs, we do a chocolate liqueur made from cocoa nibs. The extraction time is 18 to 24 months for the cocoa nibs. So if I want to sell chocolate liqueur 2 years down the road, I have to buy the cocoa nibs and put them on the alcohol now. So that's the biggest challenge. The things that you have, not the products itself, but also all the ingredients for the products to produce them. We make over 180 different distillates and extracts of all kinds of herbs and spices and fruits. And that's something we inherited from the past. And that is the big downside to having a family distillery instead of, if you have a big international conglomerate, you think of, what makes money and what doesn't make money. And you focus on the things that actually make money for you. In a family distillery, everything has value to somebody in the distillery. The liqueurs are my father's inheritance, and it's hard to let that go, even if they don't bring, money into the company. My brother likes rum, so I have to produce rum to satisfy my brothers because he doesn't drink whiskey. Silly enough. Yeah, I know.
What's wrong with
what can we do about it? Yeah.
Change brothers. Buy them out. Get out of here. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's a gradual thing. It's not something from now one day to the next. It's a thing that happens.
It does, but you still plan, and it's a great question.
Yes.
You see the long line of products. What do you put out at certain times of the year? So at Christmas, is there a certain time that you want to put out your newest line of whiskeys? So when are you planning that? When do you plan your Christmas rush? Is there something different in the spring because of all the fruits? It's just, what do you think?
Usually it's there's a standard portfolio of every product range. So we have a liqueurs product range and a whiskey product, and there's a standard portfolio which you have all year round.
Yeah.
And then on top of that is something that are the things that you produce. Father's Day is a big thing in Holland, where everybody gives their father something to drink, because what else would you want to give them? Or not a necktie or socks or something is a bit boring.
Yep.
So give them a bottle of whiskey. So you have to make sure that there's something special for those occasions. And then, for Christmas, there's another gift moment that you have to make sure that there's something new out. So things like that.
Okay. And Christmas, you must have a Christmas thing, something you focus on at Christmas more, because that is where you make most of your money, is it not?
Used to be, yeah. Well, used to be. It used to be very important, a very important time of year. What you see over the past decade, that all the other months have become more important as well. So it's not so focused anymore as it was in the beginning, where Christmas. But in our business, not just for our distillery, but in our business as a whole, that last quarter is a double quarter for everybody.
Good. That's all right. You work really hard, and then maybe you get away and have a vacation when you're allowed to have a vacation.
Yeah, right. No
vacation.
I've heard of that. My friends have vacations. Yeah.
Maybe when your son's old enough to take over all the stills, you'll take a vacation, and
maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. Are you going to do the same thing with your son? Tell him to get an education somewhere else, and then
please,
let them to come back.
I'll tell him the same thing my father told me. There's easier ways to make money than running a distillery.
Yes,
but
you get to be creative. You do. You get to let your creative side shine. I think
you have to, actually, because otherwise there's no future.
Excellent. And let's kind of go back to what Richard said about the whiskey. How much of your production is centered around whiskey? So Geneva, or anything made with your whiskey, let's say that.
I think whiskey is about 55% of our distillation capacity, and 45% is Geneva.
Okay.
Give or take, and then rum is much smaller than that.
And then the other. Okay. Did you keep the other distillery? Your father's original one, was something kept there?
It's all in the same distillery. We just
okay.
Last year we moved all the stills to the new still house where I am now.
Okay.
This is the new still house. It's 300 square meters with 6 stills.
And
we got to
show some pictures because we have this one being made. Well, first we're going to show people where you are. So you look at Belgium, Netherlands. You're right on the border, and that's where you are in relation to Europe. So right there, beautiful spot, and picture of you, good-looking guy up there. Yeah, and so here's your new distillery being built. Yeah. And it's funny because you see these things, you don't usually see them kind of outside, and that's what is that the front of the distillery or
that is actually the office. Yeah, that's the office.
Okay. And then we have the stills. You said you have 6 now. So that's a question I was going to have later, but more stills. All these are in the new distillery. Here's one question, though, because there was a still I didn't recognize. And, I don't have it in here. I'm sorry. All right, we're done. Done with the pictures.
What does it look like?
No, I'll find it and I'll bring it into the after dram because there's it's a very unique looking still. The bottom and then going into a column still up top, but it looks different. So I'm assuming it's for your liqueurs, but we'll figure that at one point. So you took over. So let's go back in history again. You took over, and I'm not sure when your voice became the voice of the distillery. Can you tell me when that kind of became you taking over?
Good question.
Internationally, when you were branching out and it was your voice?
I don't know, actually. That also happened naturally.
Just a bit over time.
Somewhere in the 90s.
Okay. Because I've been reading the articles when you were going back to it. So I have probably 12 articles, but it spans over almost 20 years. So when you first started... No. I read and I forget. I write a question, I forget, you tell me the answer. That's the way it works. Teachers are like that. We learn certain things and we expect everyone else to remember the rest. It's like, you have to remember this. And then now it's up to you. So you started talking about quality right away. No neutral grain spirits in any of the liqueurs, which happened a lot at that time when you took over, when your parents were doing it. Neutral grain spirits, the norm. You obtained all your ingredients locally, and that wasn't really happening at the time either. It was wherever it was cheaper. You distilled from scratch, so you went from grain to glass, and that wasn't really a thing here anywhere really when you first started out. So that was something that you were vocal about at the time, and that's why I was thinking, when did your voice come out? Because that's when that message started kind of branching out. I don't know if it was in Europe, but us hearing it here, it was fairly new. And then you changed the focus to whiskey and rye. And was there something else that you wanted to do when you took over that was completely new, that was maybe an extension of your parents, but something where you pushed? And the whiskey and rye, you pushed for that. Is there something else that you kind of changed?
The Geneva was really important for me, because that, I think, is a true Dutch product. It's of course our national drink, but it's also an honest product with a true heritage, and it's the oldest distilled product in the world. I know my friends in Scotland don't agree with me, but yeah, they don't agree with me.
They're not on the show right now.
They're still arguing with the Irish about who was first, but yeah, no, it's the Dutch have been distilling for a long time. It's the Dutch distilleries that brought distilling to cognac. For the creation of cognac in that region, and so Dutch has a long, significant distilling history, and Geneva was our focus product. 150, 200 years ago, that was a really important export product for the Netherlands. Okay. It's then when the introduction came from neutral alcohol into that product, when everything was diluted with neutral alcohol, that the product was also diluted and sales dwindled, and it was a race to the bottom, and also flavor-wise a race to the bottom.
And then you brought it back up. It's all you.
Yeah, there's not enough distilleries in Holland to do this that are doing the same thing. But there's new distilleries coming up, and we are creating a new culture here in Holland of grain to glass distilleries again.
Nice.
That has been a long time in the making, but yeah, now it's actually becoming a thing again.
Can I ask a question there on that?
Go for it, Rich.
Just with the new distilleries coming up, is it? I know with I sense more than know that here in Canada, on the west coast of Canada, with lots of craft distilleries popping up, there seems to be a lot of collaboration to create a culture together. Is that the same over in Holland, or is it a little bit more competitive, or are they working together?
From before, the distilling industry in Holland has been very competitive. You couldn't even visit a colleague. When my father was distiller, when my father started the distillery, you couldn't visit a colleague because you were simply not welcome. Of course, nowadays that has all changed. Younger people have taken over, and they have a completely different view on collaborations and helping each other forward. Because that's, in the end, that's on a rising tide, all ships float. So that's basically what you need to create is a situation where everybody can make a living out of it, and there also has to be enough diversity to keep the distilling industry interesting. So if there's no alternatives, if we are the only distillery in Holland, you're getting a very one-sided product range, and competition also keeps you sharp. It also makes you a better distillery, a better producer, a better company, I think. So competition is good for you.
And that kind of leads to a question we had later, but this is perfect because in this sense, when everyone's kind of building themselves up within a group internationally, rising tide floats all boats. I agree with that. But you were in it first, so you already have a market share. You have a large market share, especially at home. And with the new people, let's say Copenhagen Distillery, who we're talking to next week, they're new. They're relatively new. I think 4 years old.
They're in Denmark, yeah?
Yeah, but they're close. They're still in the same kind of... There's not a lot of distilleries up in northern... So, above Germany, there's not too many German and West. So I need to know if it's worth it to have these people for you. I know the floating boat. I know you want to talk to each other. It seems like a group, but would it be better to have less for you now, or less people coming in? Because as soon as someone comes in, I think you buy something, but will that take away from you?
The only worry is that the quality of the products being made. I think that is really important. If you want to have a European distilling culture, whatever you want to call it, I'm only going to convince people in Canada to participate in that. If the products are worth drinking. And of course, when you are a startup distillery, you've tasted the products from some startup distilleries. I've tasted some products. Not everything is so
it's worth saying.
So that is the most important part, is that the product has to be good. I think that is the only thing that truly matters when people enter the market, is that the product has to be good. Okay.
We lost Joss. I'm sure he's going to come back in a second. This happens from time to time. It wasn't a knock on anyone, just so you know. There he is. He's back. I'm going to go back to, again, you went a new direction, but you still kept your place in the past with some traditional elements. And we talk about the windmills, and they're still in operation. Is there 4 or 5 windmills that you still use?
At the moment, 4. One of the millers died.
That's a shame. Yeah. Are there specific spirits that you use the windmills for, and then other spirits where you grind them in-house?
No, most of the grain being milled is malted barley.
That's it.
So we use that both in the Genevers and in the malt whiskey, of course. So yeah, it's not that it's one specific product that is milled by the windmills.
Okay.
By the way, these people are really fanatical, because these are all volunteer millers. But as any business, sometimes I look at what the market is doing, and when the new harvest is becoming available, and sometimes it's worth waiting a little bit to buy new grain as the market. Well, no, because these people say, I got people coming over to the windmill on Sunday, and you better send me some grain to mill, because otherwise. So now these people are really fanatical about their windmills and the way that they mill, and of course they feel that it's very much superior to any other kind of mill.
Okay, and they should. And there's a question down below about rye, so we'll get to that as well. But I want to know how you pay them then. So, are you paying them in product? Is it an exchange of goods? Is that was it or?
No, usually these people don't need to be paid, because I would happily pay them, of course, because they provide a service.
Yeah.
But what they are mostly interested in, more than money, is the educational value of what they're doing to the visitors. Nice. So they think it's really important that trade, that craftsmanship that they have, that these windmills are not static buildings looking pretty on a picture, but that these windmills are actually used, and that they are actually that heritage of that milling, that is continued, and that the next generation of millers is also participating in that. I think that is their most important thing for them. More important than any money that you pay.
I brought a student group through the Netherlands. It was a sailing, so we were just sailing down the canals, and we stopped at two different windmills. So one windmill was for wood, so it was cutting wood, and the other one was milling. Yeah, so sawmill and milling, and really interesting. But I had no idea that they weren't getting paid. So if I was at yours,
they usually get a government grant that is just enough to let the building not fall apart.
Okay.
And then they usually do these tours for free or for very little money, just to spread the word about and
the history and the culture.
Yeah, this is what they really think that is the most important part of what they do.
Nice. Okay. I like that a lot.
I think it's interesting. Well, I was just going to have more of a comment. I was just thinking, maybe like 50 years ago, people would have thought, windmills, they're, long ago legacy, long gone. We've got all these engines now. And I think it's funny that it's also come now full circle, where now wind power is now seen as the future and the way that people want to drive things. So I think it's really, it's fantastic that you guys have been able to keep that up. And like you said, some of these older style buildings as well. The past, but also the future in a way.
It is also part of if the windmills are not milling, that they tend to fall apart much quicker, because the grinding of the grain keeps the woodworms and everything out of the building. So it's really important that actually mills not just are static buildings, but that actually are functional.
Thank you, sirs. How about rye? And because barley and rye are different to mill. They are. Rye is harder to mill. It's small little pebbles. And I do it for beer, and it wrecks my mill over time. So if I do a lot of rye, I have to clean it up in different ways. Just the milling, not to mention the beer making or
the windmills do some rye for me as well. But they don't have any problem with that.
Okay, well, it's heavy and it's stone on top of stone.
Yeah, it's a perfect way of milling. That way it's unbeatable. Yeah.
And does it? I'm wondering how the grain, because I didn't know this when I was a teacher 13 years ago. How the different crushing. So is it more powdery when it comes out of a mill, and is yours more coarse at the distillery, or vice versa?
No, it's very similar. Because the windmills, they actually are fanatical about how they mill. So for them, that fineness is, they want me to tell them exactly how fine to mill it, and that's what they do. Yeah. So for them, it's like a matter of pride that they do it exactly right.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. It's a matter of pride, and it's free. And I'm sure you slip them a bottle every once in a while that they could have.
Well, it's important that they continue the legacy, I think, and together we'll make that work.
Good, excellent, gentlemen. It's the whiskey geek component. So, Patrick, I'll say a whole bunch of things, and you're just going to say yes, no, or correct me if I make a mistake in this thing. And I'll ask you a couple questions as well in here. Just have it. So this goes fairly quick, even though it's a lot of questions. So bear with me, guys. So most of your barley is grown in your vicinity. Is that correct?
Yes.
Good. You work with I can't pronounce this. Wageningen University and research and farmers to grow specific grains for you. Example, the Antoninski and the KWS Sassy Rye strains. Correct?
Yeah, because we grow our own grain here in town, close to the distillery, because we are firm believers in terroir or whatever you want to call it. I think a product has to be rooted in the place that it's made. So I think for us it's really important, and then the variety, of course, is really important for the flavor component. So because we grow the grain ourselves, for us it's not that important whether that grain costs 50 cents or 60 cents. That is not the cost of the product, is not in the grain. The cost of the product is in whatever you see behind me. Energy is really a big component. Water is a big component. So the grain is only one component of the cost, and it's not the most important cost. But if you grow grain as a farmer, you are a farmer and you grow grain, what are you interested in is the amount of tons per hectare you get from your land. That is because that you get paid by the ton. So for you, it's the most important thing, how many tons comes off that field. If I grow grain for me, for my distillery behind me, it's nice if you have a good yield, but the most important part is the flavor. It's how you grow it, and how you grow it doesn't have to be the most amount of tonnage that you get from the field, but how do you get the most interesting flavor profile? And often those things are, of course, not congruent. They are dissimilar, because if you are a farmer, you want to put a lot of fertilizing on the field, so you get a lot of grain. But for me, the grain is often more interesting when the kernels are a little bit smaller, and they are better full of flavor than big plump kernels, which of course is normally what you would want, because those got more starch and more weight.
And especially with the rye, you talked about that.
Especially with the rye, but it goes for all the grain.
What the university name is? Pronounce the university for me.
It's Wageningen.
Wageningen.
Yeah,
Wageningen. Okay, thank you very much. I hate not knowing. So you malt your barley at the Holland Malt and the Dingmans Company. Your peated barley comes from Bards and Crisp in Scotland, and it's peated at 35 parts per million.
50 these days.
50 now. Good. Thank you. I like that better. Okay. 4 windmills, not 5 windmills. We already did that. You have, and this I wasn't sure because I get conflicting things from articles, 200,000 liters available in your temperature-controlled fermenters. Is it still that?
Yeah, about a little bit less.
Okay. So around that.
60. Yeah, a little bit less. Around that.
And you might as well tell us why you like it temperature controlled, because that's fairly unique as well.
It's like with the growing of the grain. Yeah, it's not about maximizing yield. Of course, yield is important for everybody in the business. You have to keep an eye on the yield. But for us, it's achieving that precise flavor profile. And we like to do that by stretching that fermentation out over a longer period than is standard for the industry. And my friends in Scotland, most of my friends in Scotland, they ferment 2 or maybe 3 days. Yeah.
You're 7. So
And we are 7-8 days for the malt
Okay.
whiskey, and 8 to 9 days for the rye whiskey and the Genevers. So, and we do that by keeping the fermentation temperature right low. So we cool the fermentation vessels down to the temperature that we want. I used to do that by running water through the jacket around the, and then we had a valve on the end of the water jacket where at night I put it a little bit further open or a little bit further closed. These days I've got a computer system that does that all for me. And does it seamlessly, so I don't have to get out of bed in the middle of the night to check on the fermentation. So that is a lot better these days.
Do you have a bed there, Patrick? Do you have a room that has a lazy boy or a bed?
No, but there's nights and evenings that I've been back to the distillery. Yeah. Okay. These days, I have to say the computers do a little bit of my work for me these days. With all the fermentation is automated, so all that filling of the fermenters and the temperature control is all computer controlled these days.
Excellent. Well, and the 7 days, so you're not stressing the yeast so that the yeast has a chance to give you the esters that you're looking for.
And you get the malolactic fermentation, of course.
Yes. You have 7 strains of yeast that you use with your various spirits. Is it still 7?
8, 9. Yeah, well.
Okay. The one you use the most, I think, is Distillers yeast, the standard M strain, and the Belgian beer yeast. Is that the most?
That's for the malt whiskey. The standard. That's the standard yeast strains for the malt whiskey. We do a very secret mixture of 50% M strain and 50% brewer's yeast.
Okay.
For that.
And you have 2 Forsyth stills, or is there more than that?
There's 2 Forsyth stills that we put in 2-3 years ago.
Okay.
I keep forgetting. One we fill with 17,000 liter wash still, and a 10,000 liter spirit still.
Okay, and your low wines comes out at what percent? Because your beer, sorry, I didn't ask this. Your beer comes out, is it closer to a beer range, so 5-6 as opposed to the 8, 9, 10?
No, it's very industry standard. Is I think it's between 7 and 8. The beers, except for the Geneva, that's a little bit stronger. That's around 9, 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And is it? Do you no? And your fermentation for Geneva is longer though.
Yes.
Longer, so that works. More alcohol coming out.
Yes.
Okay. You triple distill your Geneva, but how about the rest of your whiskey and rye? Are they all double distilled?
All the standard products that you have in the glass there, they are double distilled.
Excellent.
But of course, I wouldn't be me if I didn't put down some triple distilled stuff as well.
Okay. And talking about distilling, I thought that you were not distilling anymore. I thought you were taking over general roles, but you told me before we started that you are still in charge of a lot of it. So you do the cut. Tell us what else you do distilling.
Well, usually I come in at around 7 in the morning, and then I fill the stills. There's not that much work these days because it's a push of the button telling how much you want in what still, and then they fill themselves from there. And then I usually babysit them a little bit while I can control them from my desk in my office, so I can babysit them while they're heating up. So I usually walk in around the time that they start running.
Okay.
And then babysit them while for that first 15 minutes that the stills are running. This is always a critical moment in distilling.
Yep.
And then I go do my thing until the cut has to be made, and then I'll come back for the cuts and have a little eye on when the cuts are. The first cut is made by the computer, but the second cut is made by the guy doing the distillation, so either me or my colleague.
Okay. So it still sounds like you're the distiller.
I'm afraid I'm a teeny weeny bit of a control freak.
That's okay. This is your baby as a distiller. You're controlling it. That's good. It works for me.
Hey, the computers make it more easy than ever before, I have to say.
Okay. And but your partners, I'm guessing they're doing the cleaning for you, or you put your son down into the pot still through that hole and he cleans for you or something.
Dov, I spent my childhood cleaning stills. Yeah, I was a small child, and my father figured that I fitted into the stills more easily than he. So I spent a lot of my time cleaning stills as a child.
Okay.
I have to say this: the new stills that we operate now are all self-cleaning. So
Oh,
at the end of the day, you push the button and they clean themselves.
that's nice. Okay.
Yes, that's
So
nice.
your son doesn't understand what you went through as a child yet.
No, but
Not
he's still
quite.
young as well. And
Okay.
my oldest son is also busy studying, and it's no, but yeah, cleaning is not that big of an issue anymore as it was before.
Oh, okay. Good to know. You fill roughly 600 casks a year, and you lose 6 to 9% angel share. Is that what you? Is it still 600?
Yeah, our standard angel share is about 6% on
Okay.
a wet cask, on a cask that's been filled before.
Yes.
It is about 10 to 11% on a virgin oak cask. So the first year you lose about 11% on that virgin oak cask. If it's a really warm year, you lose a little bit more. But yeah, that's usually about it. But we fill more casks than 600. Or I have to calculate.
Okay.
Anybody got a calculator?
No,
It's 5 tons per day, 5 days a week, 45 weeks a year. So that's times 0.4 divided by 0.6.
That's a math teacher. I like this.
Divided by 200.
200 liters.
About 3,700 casks per year.
Oh my God. So this is way off. Okay.
Yeah,
so
it's a little bit. Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about your casks. You mainly go into virgin American oak, but you also use Oloroso, PX, Fino, Muscatel, Amarone, Manzanilla. You buy a lot of them. And we're going to talk about those later. Is there any that I missed that you have now that you're particularly proud of?
I did love, but you already mentioned it. I love the peated whiskey. You have it in the glass from the PX cask, yeah. But I love that peated whiskey from the Amarone cask. That was a really cool bottling. That was a full maturation because we don't do finishes. We only do full maturations as a rule.
And that was one of my next questions. Perfect. So full maturation. But you do full maturation in the virgin American oak, but any time for finishing, you've got to finish.
That's for either for young products. Yeah, so for 1-year-old Genevers, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't think full maturations in virgin oak work very well, neither in French oak or in American oak. Work very well for whiskies. So you have to be careful that the whiskey is balanced with the cask.
Okay.
So it works actually pretty well for rye whiskey. Because rye whiskey is like a big boned girl. She, that can stand up to a little bit of oak.
Of the oak.
But if you want a more delicate malt whiskey or a delicate older Genever, then I think you're better off refilling the cask or doing 1 year in a virgin oak cask and then recasking it in an older cask. Older cask.
And if you're going to have it for 10, 15, 20 years in the future, it's not going to be in that. And we understand that's good. So you have, charred a 3 or 4 for most of them. So it's either 3 or 4 char. You have,
there's different flavors from number 3 and number 4 char casks. So number 3 char casks are usually a little bit more complex.
Okay.
With more cinnamon and coconut coming through. Number 4 char casks give a little bit more color. But the flavor is more dominated by vanilla, toffee, crème brûlée kind of flavors.
Yeah. And let's go to the last one. I'm going to skip a bit because I just want to get to this question because you talked about
I talk too much. Just admit it. I talk too much.
No. I talk too much, and these guys will tell you that right away. The CO2 gas extension that you did this year, it's for it's fire retardant, right?
Yes. It's a fire suppressant system.
Can you explain that? So the fire goes off and everything fills with CO2. Is that what happens?
Yes, that's exactly what happens.
Okay.
Within 56 seconds, so within a minute.
Wow. And you had to do that for some reason. I read that in one.
Yeah, safety demanded it. Yeah, safety regulations demanded it in Holland.
Okay.
It's
Good.
quite expensive, because it's I think between the two warehouses and the distillery, I spent almost €1 million on it. So it was an expensive system.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to talk about your whiskey. So we talked about everything before. Now we're gonna taste it. And Joss and Richard, you guys are up. So, Joss, no, I picked on you first last time. Richard, let's stick with you. What do you get on the nose, buddy?
Well, I get a lot of peat. It reminds me more of a sort of a Highland peat or a Benriach peat on their peated expressions. Not so smoky. It's had time to open up in the glass. When I was drinking this last night, it was a little more pungent. Now it seems to be a little bit more well-rounded, having sat in the glass for about an hour. But and maybe there's a sweetness there. I think it comes from the PX cask. And I certainly picked that up on the palate as well. It's really, really nice, and only 3.5 years old or something like that.
It's quite young whiskey.
Yeah,
but there's a couple of older casks in there as well. I had to create that kind of depth of flavor. Otherwise, I cannot create that depth.
I've had the peated. There was I can't remember which one it was, but it was like a peated PX cask strength as well, and it might have had an age statement on it. I'll have to ask my buddy Peter about that one, but it was dynamite as well. Dynamite in a good way, not like the sulfur way. So
it must be this one right here, the heavily peated, which was fantastic. And I have some here. I could share a sample with you too, if that's the one. I love it. And you know what? If it wasn't young, it would lose too much of the peat. So you went from 35 to 50, which is really helpful, I think, and it won't lose so much peat over time now. Joss, can you pick up on the peat really well?
Yeah, I was, I've been sort of taking notes as this has been changing over time, just because I want to. It's hard to remember what you initially smelled versus what you're smelling now. So I was just going to say, as soon as I poured it into my glass, I got smashed in the face with apricots. Your typical like PX. And I'm guessing it was at 3.5 years. You guys were probably safe to entirely age that in PX exclusively rather. So you got your fig, your raisin. The peat was a little bit more actually slight. I got way more fruit in the beginning, but as Rich pointed out, as it kind of mellows, the peat comes a bit more forward. I thought I maybe got a little bit of a floral hint there. Because I did
that's
smell
from the fermentation, I think. Yeah.
And I always love to try to pick apart or try to detect what the DNA is of a particular distiller, because usually if you try enough of their products, you can kind of see there's some sort of cohesion between all of the different things that glue them together, that kind of make them, this is why this is Millstone. Palate.
What you should do is ask Yarka if she would pour you a little bit of the peated new make, because that's actually the new make that went into that bottle.
Okay. So she has some of your new make. I love having new make for tastings. I really do. Have the original new make and then the rest. That is one of my favorite tricks within tastings.
It is very cool to see the way those things develop. I'll summarize here. I'm kind of rambling on, but I get a nice little bit of creaminess. There's some nuttiness, and what was really interesting was after this wasn't there initially, but if you give enough time, I actually got a little bit of anise there, or like a black licorice note kind of on the top of my mouth. And again, the finish, you kind of got a little bit of that. There's a little bit of smoke in the finish. As Rich said, it's not so prevalent on the nose, but at the end I got that. And, wood and a little bit of heat that kind of sits in your palate at the end there. So totally love my peated drams. I love my, PX or Oloroso finished peated even more. So great dram. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Richard, you want to talk about the finish, or I'll talk about the finish if you want?
Well, the finish is super lengthy, super sweet. Yeah. You get some sort of raisins and candied fruit in there as well. And again, I'm thinking that's mostly from the PX cask. A question for you though, Patrick. I haven't had too many of your sherry expressions. I think I've had about 2, maybe 3. But the cask selection always seems to be spot on. A lot of the times when we talk about sherry casks, they're often tainted with sulfur and such. But obviously you've just been to Spain. Do you do your cask selection yourself, or how does that work? Because the casks just seem to be perfect.
Well, cherry casks are a bit of my thing. My brother always tells me that I have a sherry cask fetish.
That's okay.
About 50% of my casks are American oak, and the other about 45% is sherry casks.
Okay.
As liquid goes, probably a little bit more in sherry than in American oak because the sherry casks tend to be bigger. A lot of sherry casks we have are 500-liter butts. So the selection is really important. So you have to deal with people that you can trust that buy these casks directly from the bodegas, or you buy them directly from the bodega yourself. You have to keep in mind that the casks that we use are usually not the seasoned sherry casks that my colleagues are using in Scotland, but these are the crappy old what we call production cask or Solera cask or whatever you want to call them.
Yep.
So these have held sherry for decades, 70 years, 80 years old casks. And the problem with that is that the wood tend to be a bit
Weak.
iffy at times. Yeah, so they're weak or not as strong as a new cask, as you can imagine that after decades in a damp warehouse in Jerez. Some little creatures have made holes in it, and the wood has also sometimes become a little bit decrepit. So they're quite. You have to treat them more gently than American oak casks, which you can drop and then nothing happens. But these casks, if you drop them, then they fall into pieces. So sherry casks are a big part of my my work. This is my real thing. I think sherry cask is where we are doing things differently from most distilleries. But yeah, we get sulfured cask as well because sulfur is not that bad. It's just that it needs to be balanced within the expression. So it needs to be, it's like with perfumes. A little bit of a off flavor or of an off note makes things more interesting. Perfection is really boring. So you need layers of flavor and aromas in the expression. That means that if you have casks that have a little bit too much ethyl acetate, that glue-like solvent smell that you get from sherry casks sometimes, that is really bad for a single cask bottling. You cannot bottle that as a single cask, of course. If you get a lot of sulfur from a cask, you cannot bottle that as a single cask. But on the other hand, if you have 10 really boring casks, then adding one with a little bit of ethyl acetate and one with a little bit of sulfur kind of, brings out the beauty of it and deepens the flavor profile. So it creates, people always think that I spend my days looking for the perfect cask in the warehouse. But what you do is not that. It's exactly the opposite. You look for what casks together form the flavor profile that I want to achieve. So it's not, of course, if you do a single cask, it's different, yeah? You can understand that if you do a single cask, that cask has to have everything just on enough depth of flavor, a little bit of ethyl acetate, but not, nothing can be in excess. But if you do a fatting of multiple casks, then you can use the outlayers, the casks that have a little bit of difference to create layers of flavor in the expression that you otherwise are hard to achieve.
Thank
you.
I
ramble.
Sir.
I know I ramble.
No, but I do have to stop us because we're after the hour, so we're done. We're done with the 9th edition of the International Whiskey Journey, but we're going to continue this cask conversation because we have lots of great conversations and questions. And Canadian Whiskey Smith added a good one on the side as well. So we're going to talk about that in the after dram in 5 minutes. So we're moving our conversation from this distillery, and we're going to act like we're going to a more fun, relaxed area, but we're still going to be in the exact same spot. It really doesn't matter. But we're going to come back and we're going to talk about barrels, and we're going to talk about my favorite rye over these last 3 years, and that's your Millstone 100. So we're going to delve into that in a couple minutes. So everybody, if you could come back in 5 minutes, be fantastic to the after dram. If you don't want to miss anything in the future, click like, click subscribe, and I just want to say thank you to all of you, and we're going to see you all in about 5 minutes, and I'll finish the very last drops of that PX peated. Cheers, gentlemen, and we'll see you in a couple minutes. Bye now.